This is a question that specifically has to do with a problem that folks on this island are having with a federal entity, and one of you may be our United States Senator, so here's the issue. And I got this question, we got this question from people in Kea'au, Kohala, Kona, all over the island. And the issue is that a federal entity, specifically Fish and Wildlife, part of the Department of Interior, is putting restrictions really on using parts of this island for hunting, for development, and for almost any activity because of designating possible endangered species as possibly existing in an area. Last year, they designated 19,000 acres Kona side as that, and this is an ongoing, continuing process. Some landowners have chosen to just dedicate part of their land so that Fish and Wildlife will be satisfied, but others have just said, no, we're just not going to build there. Kona Judiciary, which is a badly needed facility on the Kona side of the island, is an example of that just decided to move. So people feel this is taking land away from private citizens, and they're not against endangered species, they're looking for balance. So starting with Ms. Hanabusa, 2 minutes on your understanding of the situation and what can be done by you to help.
I do understand this situation. We've faced it on the island of Kauai, but we faced it on Oahu, where I've actually met with Dan Ash, who is the chair of Fish and Wildlife, where we discussed when they took 292 acres and designated a critical habitat for 2 endangered species that weren't even there. And I know that's one of the frustrations when I looked at what's going on in Kona. The species are not even there, but they're creating habitats for them to return to. So the first thing we need to do is to understand exactly what's going on. I also had a discussion with Dan Ash and told him that this is a major problem and that you cannot designate huge blocks of land. And I am very familiar with the Kona courthouse because I was Judiciary Chair when we pushed that through, as well as Senate President. And there are 5 designated sites. And my understanding is the first 3 are not acceptable because of the fact that now Fish and Wildlife has said that. Having experienced it, knowing what it's like, having developed a relationship, because we were able to successfully reduce the area at Kalailoa, which is Barber's Point, down to 99 acres from 292. I know what it takes, and it takes that conversation. And that's why I asked Dan Ash to come to the Big Island and to meet the people, look at everybody eyeball to eyeball, and explain to them why this is necessary. It is not that people are not sympathetic to endangered species. It is that people do not want to hear that that critical habitat, yes, but it's not really now. It's actually for something that may come back. You've got to explain what you're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Schatz.
So I don't think anybody doubts my environmental passion or my environmental credentials, but Sherry, your question really articulated it exactly right, which is that this was just over the top. This was 19,000 acres. This was the Kona courthouse. This was part of a community development plan that had been developed as a consensus plan. This was responsible development. These were affordable housing projects. This was totally over the top, and Colleen's right too. There were large swaths of land that didn't contain the endangered species, and many of them were questionable at the very, very best. And so what we did through our offices is we tried to work with the county and the stakeholders and U.S. Fish and Wildlife and the not-for-profit community to try to precipitate a mediation process. There's one of the best, most well-known mediators is now in the process right now. We have probably about 3 out of 4 of the various stakeholders who have actually entered into some kind of agreement under the mediation. There are a few that aren't satisfied yet, so we're sort of midstream in this process. But this is something that we really have to continue to work. This is not going to be over very quickly, and I think on a going forward basis, you know, kind of massaging this and working this through is important. But I think the way to avoid this in the future is to sit down with Fish and Wildlife and some of the other federal agencies that sort of get designs on portions of the Big Island, whether it be the Department of Defense or Fish and Wildlife or NOAA or NASA. We want federal investment, but it starts with community. It starts with Big Island people and Big Island priorities. And so my job is to assist where appropriate, but not to impose anything from the federal side on people from the Big Island.